In this lesson, we're going to cover the concept of controllers, modules, and we're going to start building out our registration form. So going back to our HTML, so I've adjusted this slightly from the previous lesson. We've now called it controllers, and I've started to build out the actual form for our registration form. So I've got a name, email, password, the different types, and I've got a register button at the bottom. And let's have a quick look as to what this looks like. So there you go. We have a register button at the bottom. Now the first thing I want to talk about is this concept of a controller. Now a controller associates a DOM element and all of its children with a JavaScript module, which is where we add our business logic, our logic for our application. So I'm just going to start typing out, showing you how to register this DOM element and all of its children with a controller. So we're going to type ng controller. Again, it's another directive. I'm going to call it min max control. But we need to put our controller code somewhere where Angular can find it. To do that, we use an Angular concept called modules. So modules is how Angular organizes its code and how it expects your code to be organized. To inform Angular which module we'll be using for our application, we need to go back to the top where it says ng app. We go equals, and I'm going to call it min max. Okay. This is telling Angular that the module which will control all of our logic of our application is going to be called min max. Okay, now let's just go and run this again. So on the right hand side, you see an error. This is the console error, and this is a good point where we can show you. You're going to see this a lot, to be honest with you. This is how Angular prints out errors, how it tells you what's wrong. How it prints it out is that it doesn't tell you an error message. In fact, it just gives you a link. Now you click the link, and it takes you to a page with details of your error, the stack trace, everything, and including some very helpful hints at the bottom as to what might be causing the error. If there's got another link inside it, just keep on clicking in until there's no more links. And this is telling us that the module min max is not available, which is understandable. We haven't actually created it yet. So let's go ahead and create our module. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding our module in another script. Let me just paste at the bottom. I'm going to add it to a JavaScript file called main.js. Let me click into that. I like to call the Angular module, I like to store it in a variable called app. You can store it in whatever variable that you want to call it. So I'm going to call angular.module. The first parameter is the name of our module, which is min-max. And the second parameter is a list. This is how we show Angular other modules which we depend upon. But for now, we're going to keep it blank. So let's go back to the page and we're going to refresh it. Okay, we've got another error. Oh, min-max controller is not a function got undefined. Now that is basically because it's seeing in the HTML that we're looking for a controller called min-max control. It's found a module called min-max in main.js, but it hasn't found a controller. So let's create the controller. So how we create the controller is we go just underneath, type app.controller. The first parameter is the name of our controller, which we called min-max control. The second parameter is a function. And very importantly, the first parameter to that function is a special variable called scope. So anything we add to the scope variable, we can actually data bind to in the HTML. So let's add a scope variable called form model equals to an object. And let's start attaching the input controls to this scope variable of form model. For each of these controls, I'm now going to add ng model dot form model dot. This is the name. For the email, I'm going to add the email. And for the password, I'm going to add a password. Let's go back into here, refresh the page. Okay, no errors, looking good. So now I can type in the name and the password. Okay, but how do I know this is working? This you don't really know. So I'm going to show you a little trick that we use, and to really show you visually on the page what's happening within the scope variable. So we add a pre-tag at the bottom, and then just like in the previous lesson we showed you data binding, we're going to data bind the form model scope variable. Refresh the page. So you can see at the bottom of the screen that it's actually binding the data and showing it on the page. But actually, it's kind of hard to read. It's not formatted nicely. So let's go back into the HTML, and we're going to type in the pipe character and the word JSON. And I'm just going to show you what this does. So you can see now at the bottom, that's actually rendering the scope, the form data objects in a much more easy to read format. This is what we call in Angular a filter. When you're data binding, you don't just have to put the variable in, you can actually pass whatever that variable is through another function using this pipe command. And there's a number of built-in functions in Angular. One is called JSON, and you can use many other filters in Angular, or in later lessons we're going to show you how to create your own filters. Let's go back to the page. So now we've got this, I'm going to hit register, and well, nothing's happening really at all. So how do we actually start doing something interesting with this form? I really want to capture when someone clicks on register and perhaps start the process of submitting this data to my server. So a couple of ways of doing this. I'm going to show you this one way, and I'm going to introduce you to another directive. Our new directive is called ngClick, and I'm going to pass to ngClick the name of a function on submit. Okay. So what this directive is doing is it will capture any click on the button, and when that happens, it will call the onSubmit function on your controller. So let's add the onSubmit function to our controller. Now again, even for functions, it needs to be attached to the scope variable if you want to have access to it from the HTML. All we want to do here is just console log, hey, I'm submitted. We could additionally just log out the actual form model. So let's just do that as well. Okay. Let's go back to the page. asim.com. asim. And there you go. So we're printing out the model as well.